Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating and honestly deeply empathetic psychological concept. We're looking at the silent burden of the easy child. We're going to explore the psychology of people who literally never complain, even when they are deeply, genuinely hurt. It's this behavioral pattern that kind of just hides in plain sight all around us. And getting a grasp on it, well, it can completely change how we view resilience, quietness, and really the unspoken emotional weight that the people around us are carrying every single day. Okay, let's dive into this. Have you ever felt like your problems are just too small to mention? Like, have you ever kept things entirely to yourself until you felt practically invisible? This right here is the core hook of what we're looking at today. It's a deeply, deeply isolating feeling to harbor. You basically convince yourself that speaking up would just be a total annoyance, or you just assume everyone else's plate is already way too full to deal with your stuff. But psychology tells us that if you do this, you are absolutely not alone. In fact, there's a very specific, deeply ingrained reason why this happens.
From the outside looking in, this kind of quiet endurance, it just looks like unending, saintly patience. But the reality is actually vastly different. What looks like patience, say simply smiling and nodding when you're handed this completely unfair workload at the office, or, cheerfully agreeing to cancel your own plans because a friend needs you yet again, that is actually a learned survival mechanism. It's not about having some infinite superhuman tolerance for discomfort. Actually, scratch that, it's the opposite. It's about learning really early on in life that staying quiet was the safest, or honestly, maybe the only viable route you could take.
So the crucial point is that this phenomenon actually has a clinical name: emotional self-suppression. It's defined as a psychological survival mechanism where an individual, consciously or unconsciously, keeps the problems completely to themselves. They shrink their own presence down to the extreme point where they feel entirely invisible to the world around them. Really think about that for a second. If you have ever lived this, maybe bearing your own grief so you can comfort somebody else, seeing it defined so clearly is just incredibly powerful validation. Your silence is not a character flaw. No way. It's a profound psychological adaptation that was literally designed to protect you. Let's move to and see how this builds across a person's lifespan, because this survival mechanism certainly doesn't just appear out of nowhere. Our source traces this directly back to our earliest formative years. It usually kicks off at step 1, being labeled the easy child. You know the kid, the one who never caused a fuss, never threw a tantrum during a chaotic family conflict, the one who just never made demands on their stressed-out parents. But being labeled easy sets this really tricky psychological trap. Step 2 shows the evolution. That overly accommodating child inevitably grows into a silent adult who just continues to swallow their own voice. And tragically, step 3 reveals the deeply ingrained result of all this. This adult now genuinely believes that their personal needs are inherently a burden to everyone else. The trajectory from a highly praised childhood trait to profound adult suffering is pretty stark. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the core motivation behind all this silence. Like, why do they actually do it? Well, our source provides a very clear, definitive answer. They stay silent to maintain stability. This isn't just about being passive or shy or introverted. It is an active, intensely exhausting effort to manage their environment. They are literally using their own silence as a tool to keep the peace. Picture them at a really tense holiday dinner. They're the ones biting their tongue, frantically changing the subject just to diffuse a looming argument. They absorb the shockwaves of life so that nothing rocks the boat for anyone else. They become these invisible emotional shock absorbers for their families, their workplaces, and their entire social circles. And this brilliantly illustrates the real crux of the issue, which is the immense psychological cost. Over a lifetime, that emotional toll gets unbelievably heavy. You are never complaining, even when you are actively hurting, whether that's physically or emotionally. You're walking around with this constant, heavy belief that your very needs, just wanting a little support or someone to vent to, are a totally unacceptable burden to others. You are perpetually putting external stability way above your own internal well-being. And finally, you find yourself completely trapped in the role of being the person everyone simply assumes is always okay. Because let's be real, you're so good at hiding the struggle that nobody ever even thinks to actually check in on you. Which brings us to our final thought today. What is the true cost of being the person who is always okay? This explainer really shows us that the cost is incredibly steep. It's the cost of your own visibility, your own needs, and your own authentic emotional life. It invites all of us to take a step back and reevaluate this emotional self-suppression, whether we recognize it in the mirror or in the quietest, easiest people around us. Just take a moment and think about who in your life might be silently carrying this exact burden right now. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will leave you with that question to ponder.